Welcome to another biology video. We're doing the Unit 4, Senses and Coordination, which is about the nerve system, the nervous system. And of course we're starting with paragraph 1. To start with, we are going to look at the basics. So which sense is there, which sensory organ, it's supposed to say sensory organ, is connected to it, and which stimuli or stimulus can we pick up with it. The first sense would be hearing. You do this with your ears, and with your ears you can pick up sounds. You can hear sounds. Seeing we do with our eyes, and this way we can pick up visuals, lights and colors. Finally, we taste with our tongue, and thanks to that we can sense flavors. We smell with our nose, and we can pick up smells or odors. Last one is feeling with our skin, and here you guys know I do not completely agree with the stimulus touch, but there's more to it, but that's at a later point. So these are the 5 senses we have. So let's start a story. We have a stimulus. In this case, it's a red Lego brick. Our skin, in this case our foot, comes in contact. So this is our sensory organ, the skin. We step on it, and the second we step on it, an electrical signal is made. This electrical signal is sent through our leg to our spinal cord, to our brain, in other words, the central nervous system, by an impulse. It's an electrical signal. That's how it travels from sensory organ to brain. An impulse. And then the second it arrives at our brain, it codes for a message where we say, hey, you're standing on a Lego brick, or pain, or wow, that's so nice, or whatever your brain thinks about it. Another example would be, we see the Lego brick before we stand on it, so the visuals, the light reflect into our eyes. From the eyes, this impulse is sent to the central nervous system, and we can now define and sense red Lego brick. This is, crudely said, the pathway of our senses. So the basics up until now are senses. You need to be able to name all of them. The sensory organs linked to them. An example could be of a stimulus. So if I'm asking for an example of a visual stimuli, that you can say the pen I'm holding, or your red pants, or whatever. The impulse that those are the electrical messages being sent around in our body. Now, as you know, it gets a little more tricky. You have to be able to name a threshold value, inadequate stimulus or stimuli, habituation, and motivation. I'll explain these terms in the upcoming slides multiple times, so if the first example doesn't work for you, perhaps the next one will. So this is a simple graph. The higher we go, the stronger the stimulus is. So you can have a really weak stimulus, example, I just barely touch your skin, or I'm poking you, or the sound is really soft or really loud. As the time passes, and we're adding a threshold value. A threshold value is, a threshold means drempel. It means or you fall below it or you go over it. Everything that falls below a threshold value, so for example this stimulus and this part of the stimulus, is what we call an inadequate stimulus. Inadequate stimulus. Now the story is behind this line I draw. So I put on music in the class. You don't hear it. So the first 2 steps, let's go back a second. I put on music in the class. You don't hear it, so that means it's below your threshold value. If you hear it really softly, it means you hear it, but right now you don't hear it at all. So I put it a little louder. You still don't hear it, because it's below your threshold value. It needs to be over it for you to be able to sense it. So I put it a little louder, and finally you hear the music I put on in class. So everything underneath the threshold value, alles onder de drempel, you do not sense, you do not experience. Everything above becomes an adequate stimulus, so adequate meaning enough, you sense. The second it goes over your threshold value, it becomes enough. So we have the music, and in this case, in this scenario, I was changing the strength of the stimulus. But we can also change the threshold value. As you can see here, your threshold value went up due to a process called habituation. Habituation is getting used to a sense. So your brain is like, yeah, this has been happening a while now. I have no need for this. So you get used to it, and your threshold value for that sense, not for everything, for that sense goes up. And as you can see, the strength of the stimuli is not as strong anymore. So, for example, you still hear it, but not as strongly anymore. You still hear it, but not as strongly anymore. And at one point, your habituation goes up that high that you don't even hear it anymore. Music you could hear before in the classroom, you're not sensitive to it anymore. I haven't changed the volume anymore, but you got used to it. Habituation happened to you. An alternative is motivation. Something gives you a reason to lower the threshold value. For example, I go shouting, "Whoa, listen to this song, man. This is a really good song. You should hear it." So for a second, you become alert and start paying attention to the sounds in your environment, and your threshold value lowers. Then you decide, like, well, this is a really boring song, so who cares? Your habituation kicks in again, and your threshold value goes up again. So in short, this was an example both changing the stimulus, which is possible, and both changing your threshold value. Often not both happen. Usually a stimulus stays the same strength, but for example, smells and sounds are great examples of stimuli which weaken or become stronger. Another example. So right now you're watching a video, a biology video. You see your keyboard, beautiful keyboard, you see your mouse, you see your hands. You're enjoying a beautiful video, and you're sensing your environment, special visual ones. However, there is a stimulus which does not change in strength. It's there, but it does not change in strength. But you're not detecting it. So that means it's underneath your threshold value. You're not detecting it right now, so it's an inadequate stimulus underneath your threshold value. Up until the point I tell you what it is, so I give you a reason to be searching for it. And of course, it's your nose. So right now I'm motivated to start seeing your nose. As you're looking at your computer screen, I'm telling you, you can see your nose. I motivate you to see it. Threshold value lowers, and suddenly you keep seeing the outline of your nose. But as the time passes, probably really quickly, in like 10 seconds, even less maybe, you get habituation again. Your brain is like, yeah, really, I've seen this my whole life already, 14 years. It's been in my visual. I really don't care. It's not important. So your threshold value goes up again. Habituation It's not that you're lazy, it's just saving energy. Your brain doesn't need to be overstimulated, so it filters away unimportant things. Like, your brain really doesn't need to know every 5 seconds, knows. It's not important. So another example of that a stimulus is below your threshold value, so an inadequate stimulus, you can motivate yourself to see it, so your threshold value goes down, but habituation just kicks in again. Another example of a stimulus that does not change in strength. 1 second. So it has the same strength. It's going to be the clicking of a pen during a test. So let's say this clicking happens non-stop, same strength, same speed, so it does not change at all. You can hear it, which means it's above your threshold value. So at this point, you're going to try and motivate yourself. You're like annoyed, don't want to hear it anymore. You're going to try and motivate yourself to not hear it. So to heighten your threshold value. That's possible. Some people can focus themselves really well to heighten the threshold value and suddenly not hear it anymore. Alternative is, however, that you try really hard, but you just get more and more annoyed, and it seems to get louder and louder and louder and more annoying, so that you lower your threshold value. Not what you intend to, but it can happen. So another example of a stimulus which stays the same strength and motivation changing your threshold values. So this was a lot of information. Feel free to rewatch as your heart's content, of course. After this video, I expect you to easily give me example of stimuli. So whether I'm asking for visual, sounds, for your skin, you need to be able to point out what a stimulus is. You need to be able to describe a threshold value. If you sense something that it's an adequate stimulus, and if you don't sense something that it's an inadequate stimulus. For example, air conditioning running on the background, that's an inadequate stimulus. Habituation, the process of it happening, recognizing it, giving examples, being able to describe what it is, and this, more importantly, why it happens. And finally, motivation, that you can recognize it in a story, that you can give me an example of it happening and why it's happening, to make you more alert of situations. This is what I expect you to be able to tell after paragraph 1, or after this video. If you still have questions left, please do ask. You know how to find me. Good luck.